Welcome back to 7th Grade Mustache. On today's episode, we'll be speaking about the hate makers, the people that push and steer current events, that cause people in their tribal mentality to hate this group or hate that group or hate this person or that person. They steer the sheeple, and you will remain the victims of these people and their experiments until you wake up and channel your inner man and control the direction your life is going in. So we're going to start by talking about the war in Iraq. Now, the war in Iraq happened because September 11th happened. So September 11th happened, and it galvanized all the American sentiment towards patriotism and fighting the bad guy and going after people who did this.
When did you recognize that shit yourself, though? Like personally, when you saw it, like I remember that election, like it was like the 2002 election, whatever election it was, where I just knew they were going to vote Democrat because all this shit.
2000 election.
Yeah, and you just knew. Then all of a sudden, you heard all the, not the old people, but all these young people, all these 18, 19, 20-year-olds going, we feel we need somebody to protect us. We need somebody strong. We need somebody to, and I'm like.
But see, that's when everybody went from raging against the machine to raging on behalf of the machine.
The machine, yeah,
and
yes.
That was the rise of the surveillance state when the Patriot Act was created and they took away everybody's rights.
See, the whole deal is that they have you convinced that the Democrats do this and the Republicans do this, but the motherfuckers work in hand with each other. The prime example, so the Patriot Act passes under a Republican, but it's the Democrats that use that shit to the fullest. You know, like,
no. Like, fuck all that political bullshit. This is what I'm noticing, or what I noticed right after this shit happened. Nobody had nothing to say about it. The hardest people in the world were so timid and quiet and had nothing to say. And the most revolutionary people had nothing to say. And the same thing happened in 2020, 19 years later, when this disease was created and all these people just laid down and you saw, listen, man, it goes to show that when the shit hits the fan, you will see who is trill and who ain't trill. But look.
I'm sorry, go ahead. No. All I was going to say, both sides do the same shit. Stop acting like one is good and one is bad. Look, everybody.
See, you are a fool if you think there are sides. There isn't. Yes. There are no sides.
But that's why that's what makes this conversation about the hate makers so important. You know, what they say in America's 220 years history, there's only 2 years we weren't in an armed conflict. What they're telling you is that hate making, having an enemy, you have a designated enemy by the people in charge. And next thing you know, you guys are fighting or not liking each other because of race, sex, or whatever. But the whole time they're fucking you over. It's a distraction.
Instead of looking for weapons of mass destruction, people were falling for weapons of mass distraction. So on October the 2nd, 2016, there was an article that ran, and the headline was, Pentagon paid PR firm $540 million to fake terrorist videos. Now, the Pentagon paid a British PR firm $500 million to create fake terrorist videos in Iraq in a secret propaganda campaign exposed by the Bureau of Investigative Journalism.
Wow.
The PR firm was called Bell Pottinger, known for its array of controversial clients, including the Saudi government and Chilean dictator Augusto Pinochet's foundation. Now, look up Augusto Pinochet and how the intelligence agencies had their hands all over that coup in Chile. But this PR firm, Bell Pottinger, they work with the U.S. military to create the propaganda in a secretive operation. The firm reported to the CIA, the National Security Council, and the Pentagon on the project with a mandate to portray al-Qaeda in a negative light and track suspected sympathizers. Both the White House and General David Petraeus, the former general who shared classified information with his mistress, signed off on the content produced by the agency. Now, they made TV segments in the style of Arabic news networks like Al Jazeera. And fake insurgent videos, which could be used to track people who would watch them. This was according to a former employee. The agency staff worked alongside high-ranking U.S. military officers in their Baghdad Camp Victory headquarters.
All I was going to say is American intelligence has a history of doing this. Going back to the Black Panther Party, which we talked about, COINTELPRO, whatever, we talk about what happens is they try to build up the enemy so bad. Next thing you know, you're recruiting people. They've done this in the past where they couldn't, to make a story, they're like, okay, we're going to create this. Next thing you know, you have sympathizers. So America has a history of printing literature or creating commercials or whatever you want to call it on behalf of the enemy. Next thing you know, you got real people joining because of it. Whenever they interview the old Black Panthers, they'll tell you, we didn't have enough money to make these pamphlets. We didn't make this shit. Well, that's what they're doing right now. They're creating Al-Qaeda and giving them strength. But next thing you know, hey, you got all kinds of sympathizers based on this material.
Have you ever heard of the Black Liberation Army, the BLA?
BLA, CBS.
They were never infiltrated. You know why? Because they did not have an open door policy like the Black Panthers did. This was invite only, but we'll come back to that later.
No, the point I was making is that whenever the American intelligence agencies do this, they end up recruiting people on behalf of the other person. And it's just one of these things. They do it all the time. The first thing you do when you wage war on somebody, you have to wage a war in the mind of your own people. Your people have to authorize the war. So they got to see that person as the enemy. And they have to create this propaganda so people see Al-Qaeda as this big threat.
Okay, all right, hold your fire. Now, there was the first media interview of any Bell Pottinger employee was with a video editor who worked for them. His name was Martin Wells. He no longer works for the company, but he told the Bureau that his time in Camp Victory was shocking, eye-opening, and life-changing. The firm's output was signed off by, as I said before, General Petraeus. He was then the commander of the coalition forces in Iraq, and on occasion by the White House. There were 3 types of operations commonly used in Iraq at the time. So the first was white. There was gray, and there was black. So white is attributed information, and gray is unattributed information. Black is falsely attributed information. These types of black ops used for tracking who was watching a certain thing were pretty standard part of the industry toolkit. The London-based PR agency was brought into Iraq soon after the U.S. invasion. In March 2004, it was tasked by the country's temporary administration with the promotion of democratic elections, a high-profile activity, which it trumpeted in its annual report. The firm soon switched to a less high-profile activities. However, the Bureau has identified transactions worth $540 million, which between the Pentagon and Bell Pottinger were for information operations and psychological operations on a series of contracts issued from May 2007 to December 2011. A similar contract at around the same annual rate of $120 million was enforced in 2006. The bulk of the money was for the costs such as production and distribution. Lord Bell told the Sunday Times, but the firm would have made around $115 million a year in fees. So where did the rest of the money go? Into somebody's pockets. Yeah. So I brought this up. I brought up this article, and this article has been all over the internet since it was first printed in 2016. But this article highlights how psychological operations were being conducted by the U.S. military, the White House, and intelligence agencies created by British PR companies. So this is a PSYOP. This is a huge PSYOP campaign. And you got people on college campuses, in the break room, on their jobs, showing these beheading videos, which were fake.
How about this? Do you remember one of the big deals was on those videos? One of the guys, the Arab dude had one of these military intelligence tattoos. Everybody kept saying, he's one of our guys. He's one of our guys because of that tattoo that was on his forearm. So this makes more sense now.
But why would the U.S. government want to do this? Because it cranks up enlistment numbers. It causes people who don't know any better, the poor white trash and the poor black and Latino kids, to go and enlist in the military. Yes.
Well, hold it. This goes back to the beginning of our conversation. Hate makers. There are people who profit on your animosity towards another person. It's much easier to control the masses when they have escaped.
They are manipulating and relying on the lower nature of humanity.
Okay. God, dog. I don't have. Look. So Hitler was scapegoating when he used the Jews. Whenever these big regimes take over, they got to scapegoat somebody. They got to create.
Okay, you want to go there with it? We can go there with it.
Hold it. You said I talk about them too much. Here's where it gets complicated. Where they really doing some shit. That's where it gets complicated. But the bottom line is that's how you get the masses to conform with you. You give them an enemy. You give them a common enemy. And when you do that, for black people, it's going to be poor white people. For poor white people, it's going to be black people. All the while, these rich black and white motherfuckers, these boule niggas, and these rich entitled white motherfuckers don't give a damn about us, and they keep making money on you through the corporate slavery. So it's one of these things was if you have an enemy, somebody for you to fight against, Crips and Bloods, as long as they're fighting, somebody's making money, whether through the drug trade or whatever. It's always a thing like that. That's the issue. So how do you find out who your real enemy is? There's an African comedian, and she started talking, and she kind of went left with it. People start walking out of her comedy set because she said, in Africa, she said, when I came to America, I thought I would be able to relate to black Americans, and I couldn't relate to them. And she goes, the reason why is because you look your oppressor in the face and talk shit to them. You tell white people that you have a problem with them. But in Africa, the black man at the bottom does not realize that there's a white man at the top of all this. And literally in our countries in Africa, the propaganda is so thick where you got the Red Cross and these people coming in and these missionaries where you think the enemy is a black man. You don't even realize there's a white man at the top. But in America, there's a white man at the top that causes all this. And she was very eloquent and poignant when she was pointing out that where she comes from, they think the white people are their saviors. They think white Jesus is real. And she broke that shit down so amazing where, you don't always recognize who your oppressor is. Over here, we get it. Even the white folks know there's a white man at the top or a white woman at the top taking advantage of them. You see it in so many different ways, but in some places they don't recognize who their oppressor really is. And so there's no excuse for us not to, do I want to say rise up? I don't know what the right word is, but there's no excuse for us to maintain the status quo when we know better.
So, okay, let's go back in time a little bit. So let's talk about Nazis, real Nazis for a second, because February 20th, 1939. So February 20th, 1939, a rally of Nazi-affiliated German American Bund at Madison Square Garden. Turn that off. This was a huge rally with Nazis in attendance, Nazi sympathizers, big old Nazi banners hanging from the rafters in MSG, okay? And this was captured in this documentary called A Night at the Garden. It was nominated for a 2019 Academy Award.
Wow.
And in this documentary, you see this enormous George Washington backdrop and Hitler youth-style uniforms. How is this possible? Here's how. A substantial portion of the Bush family's fortune was derived from the extensive business relations over many years between the Nazis and the family patriarch Prescott Bush. In 1926, Prescott Bush became vice president of W.A. Harriman and Company. Soon afterwards, the company expanded into the Soviet Union. After negotiations with Leon Trotsky and Felix Dzerzhinsky, Harriman obtained a contract to mine manganese. In 1927, the company was criticized for its support of totalitarian governments in Italy and in the Soviet Union. Now, George Herbert Walker wrote to W. Averell Harriman, pointing out that the suggestion that we withdraw from Russia smacks somewhat of the impertinent. I think we have drawn our line and should stick to it. Now, W.A. Harriman also formed a partnership with the German industrialist Fritz Thyssen. Where does that last name sound familiar to you? Where have you heard that last name before? Thyssen. ThyssenKrupp. They're the elevator company. If any of you have ever been in a skyscraper, worked in skyscrapers, and you get into the elevator and you see the name Thyssen, or Thyssen as they pronounce it, you see ThyssenKrupp. They make elevators. They maintain elevators. You'll see their service vans parked outside of all types of high-rise buildings, and they work on escalators. Okay? That's all German Nazi shit. Now, this guy, Fritz Thyssen, this German industrialist, in 1926, Harriman Clarence Dillon of Dillon Reed Company helped Thyssen and Friedrich Flick to establish German Steel Trust. According to Anton Chaitkin, the Flittman-Harriman partnership was directly supervised by Prescott Bush. Dillon Reed provided 2 representatives to the board of German Steel Trust and took responsibility for its corporate banking. In 1928, Thyssen formed United Steelworks, a company that controlled more than 75% of Germany's ore reserves and employed 200,000 people. Thyssen started a joint venture with Harriman called Union Banking Corporation. This was used to transfer funds between the United States and Germany. In 1931, W.A. Harriman Company merged with the British-American banking house Brown Brothers. Prescott Bush, along with W.A. Harriman, E. Roland Harriman, and George Herbert Walker, became managing partners in the new company Brown Brothers Harriman. This was to develop into the most important private banking house in America. So, these guys, they're making their money. They're going into these war-torn places with these totalitarian governments. They're setting up mining companies, and they're getting all the money and all the funds in it. Meanwhile, this young upstart named Adolf Hitler is making noise with the labor unions in Germany.
People don't understand what a Nazi is.
They're fascist. It's a fascist government.
No. You leave off socialism. Don't leave off the socialist part. People think
that's no. Okay. Stop. Let me help you out, because they start as socialists. Socialism is how they build their army. And then once they become powerful, then the enforcement of their rules is fascism, because it's the government and corporations together. That is fascism. But you can't have that unless you have an army of people drinking your Kool-Aid. How do you do that? You sell them this pie in the sky nonsense about how we're all equal and we're in this together.
Look, I told you the story. You know the story. I've told her a past podcast where I was talking to my daughter, and she's like, socialism is a good thing because this. I'm like, well, so you want socialism because you don't trust the government? Yeah. Well, who makes the decisions in the socialism? And she pauses because she's like, the government. You're giving the government more power. I'm not saying capitalism is not flawed. I'm just trying to tell you the idea that socialism will make what your situation better is you are leaving your future in the hands of somebody else. You're leaving your welfare to somebody else. Nobody can take better care of you than you. That's that bullshit, and that's how they start. Then you turn into fascism. That whole totalitarian government shit takes over, and people don't get that shit. These motherfuckers, and that's another thing. You people don't forget your boy Henry Ford, the one that everybody thinks is such a great guy, the one who fucked up our medical and our education system. He was another socialist. He thought that he knew better for me, and that's exactly what he tried to do in America. The shit that happened in the Soviet Union, what they try to do over here. And the reason that they had that big rally in 1939 is because, again, he just told you, Hitler got in with the labor unions. Socialists get in with the labor unions, and that's how they start from the bottom up. And then it either turns into social. Don't forget about communism, because when you talk about the Democratic Party, you had communists as part of the Democratic Party. They tell you that the Red Scare was a red herring, it wasn't real. It was real. So that's the hustle. That's the shell game. Look, you should hate the corporations. You should hate the guy on top. But don't think that these motherfuckers got a better plan for you.
Okay.
That's that hustle shit.
Check it out. In 1934, Prescott Bush sent W.A. Harriman an article that appeared in the March 19th edition of the New York Times. The article claimed that the Polish government intended to take action against the Upper Silesian Coal and Steel Company because it was controlling 45% of its steel production. The newspaper reported that 2/3 of the company's stock is owned by Friedrich Flick, a leading German steel industrialist, and the remainder is owned by interests in the United States. This, of course, was Bush, Harriman, and Walker. Now, Prescott Bush's business interests in Germany suffered after the outbreak of the Second World War. On the 20th of October, 1942, the United States government seized the assets of Union Banking Corporation.
Wow.
The shares of the bank were owned by Prescott Bush, E. Roland Harriman, and a couple of members of the Nazi Party. Under the Trading with the Enemy Act, the government took over the Union Banking Corporation and the Silesian American Corporation, a company that has been managed by Prescott Bush and his father-in-law, George Herbert Walker. Now, that brings us to Smedley Butler. This was actually maybe 8 years before. Major General Smedley Butler is a very important figure in all of history. Here's why. He spoke about Wall Street bankers and the military working together in his 1933 speech and in his 1935 book, War is a Racket. Here's a quote from the book. War is a racket. A racket is best described, I believe, as something that is not what it seems to the majority of people. Only a small inside group knows what it's about. It is conducted for the benefit of very few at the expense of the masses. I believe in adequate defense at the coastline and nothing else. If a nation comes over here to fight, then we'll fight. The trouble with America is that when the dollar only earns 6% over here, it gets restless and goes overseas to get 100%. Then the flag follows the dollar, and the soldiers follow the flag. I wouldn't go to war again as I have done to protect so many lousy investment bankers. There are only two things we should fight for. One, the defense of our homes, and the other is the Bill of Rights. War for any other reason is simply a racket. There isn't a trick in the racketeering bag that the military gang is blind to. It has its finger men to point out enemies, its muscle men to destroy enemies, its brain men to plan war preparations, and a big boss, super nationalistic capitalism. It may seem odd for me, a military man, to adopt such a comparison. Truthfulness compels me to. I spent 33 years and 4 months in active military service as a member of this country's most agile military force, the Marine Corps. I served in all commissioned ranks from second lieutenant to major general. And during that period, I spent most of my time being a high-class muscle man for big business, for Wall Street, and for the bankers. In short, I was a racketeer, a gangster for capitalism. Smedley Butler. General Smedley Butler gave a speech to the 1932 Bonus March. That was a march for World War I veterans who'd come to Washington, D.C. to demand Congress give them their promised back pay, only to have the veterans camp burned down by the U.S. Army days later. There it is. Your thoughts?
That's craziness. Well, I think the biggest thing is what he's telling you is something that we've been telling you for a while. You're supposed to fight for your homes. You're supposed to fight for the Constitution because it's what, the Bill of Rights is what gives us so much power as a people. But all this other shit is always about money, and it's not about the preservation. Here's the deal. Back in the day, when me and you were younger, all you heard about was it's about democracy. But look at Patrice Lumumba, who was a Democrat who was voted through democracy, and the CIA kills the dude.
Threw him out of an airplane.
Yeah, it's not about democracy. It's about what gets America what it wants. And sometimes as an American, we don't realize that our government's doing shit on our benefit or on our behalf that's not in line with our own reason, our own rationale. So when you got this major general who is from the Marine Corps explaining to you like, hey, I was part of that muscle for years. I recognize it now. I see what's going on. I'm basically a crony for these lousy bankers. That's some
dude. There's a movie out about this right now.
Oh shit.
Yes, it's on HBO. You can watch it on HBO right now. It's called Amsterdam. It was in the theaters a couple of months ago, and it has John Washington, Denzel Washington's son. It has Christian Bale in it. It has Margot Robbie. It has Robert De Niro. Robert De Niro plays Major General Smedley Butler, but they changed his name. Dude, watch that movie. Now, there's some made-up things in there, like those three characters I just mentioned. They weren't real people, you know what I'm saying? But they do that to, like, Hollywood, this shit, you know what I'm saying? Dude, watch that movie Amsterdam, because it's about this plot that he's talking about. Because Smedley Butler was approached by Wall Street bankers to instigate a coup to take over the presidency. And
oh, no shit.
Yes, to get Roosevelt out of office. Dude, the Piccolo player is a motherfucker.
but like I said, the reason this hate maker is so important is because they point at somebody and then you just go attack that person, not realizing that motherfucker's in the same predicament as you. You know what I'm saying? Like literally, you guys are on y'all two heads on the same coin. But I'd rather fight somebody I can beat. And I remember, oh, I had a view. Remember Joy Behar or whatever, that one chick, and she was saying, "Yeah, we don't need guns because of you can't fight the government anyway." And I have such an issue with that because I'm like, well, what about Vietnam? What about them rice farmers that whooped our ass? Well, that's how we paint it. But or right now, our president said he's going to take assault rifles. He said you can't fight the government with an assault rifle. You need an F-16. That's what fucking Biden just said in a speech, and I'm like, hey, check this out, Roscoe.
Wow,
so he was doing
that right there is mind control.
Hold it. I'm not even. It was a speech for Martin Luther King's birthday. Go listen to the speech for Martin Luther King's birthday, and out of nowhere he starts talking about gun control, and there's nothing.
Right,
there's
and
nothing
then around that same time, I sent you a video that showed a news clip of somebody with a camcorder recording this guy talking shit to somebody in a bar, lying about all these degrees that he has, all these accomplishments that he has, and then cut to Sam Donaldson. Then cut to Sam Donaldson on the ABC News talking about this motherfucker is a bald ass liar.
Newsweek said okay. So my brother sent a video. This is from like 83, 82, somewhere around there, where he was a senator, and he goes off on this guy in a bar bragging about his edge. How is he any different from Trump? Yeah, I graduated top of my class. I had nothing but scholarships. And then they basically vet him in the news. They're like, no, he didn't. He wasn't at the top of his class. No, he wasn't this. The guy's a lying sack of shit. Let's segue with that. I keep trying to tell you there's no difference between the two. Now, everybody was on Trump when they went to his house in Mar-a-Lago or whatever, and they find all these classified documents. The main one talking shit was Biden and his vice president. But wait a minute, Biden is being talked to right now from all the classified information at his home from when he.
Listen. He is a sociopath. He is the same as Bill Clinton. Is a type of guy that runs for president. It's the type of guy that excels at that job. He's just really shitty at the job. But here's the thing, though.
Yeah, he doesn't excel at it. Yeah, that's true.
This is what I'm. He's been a senator for like 3,000 years. Yeah. So I mean,
yeah,
these people will do anything. His son was just like him. That's what people don't understand. That this motherfucker that is like smoking crack and and then he fucked his sister-in-law, his dead brother's wife, months after his brother died. Okay. That's a sociopath that thinks like that. This motherfucker is just like his daddy. All that crack smoking crazy shit, corn pop, that shit comes from his dad.
But that's why everybody's waking up, because y'all quick to throw brothers in jail. Y'all quick to throw people in jail for using drugs, but you ain't throw your son in jail.
On camera, buying the shit, on camera, smoking the shit. This motherfucker has committed all types of treasonous crimes. This fucking nonsense. But listen. Here's the thing, man. These people got you so distracted with all this nonsense that you're not paying attention to the big picture, to the real football game that's going on. Okay, it's planetary, it's interplanetary. So another one that comes up is the war in the Middle East, the constant fighting in the Middle East. And how, the Israelis are always under attack, and, the poor Israelis, they're in trouble, blah, blah, blah. But what they don't tell you is how they have their own psyops going on.
Mossad is everywhere.
The Israeli intelligence agencies helped to create Hamas to destabilize Yasser Arafat and his Fatah movement, who was very powerful at the time. The Mossad, Israelis Institute for Intelligence and Special Tasks, and the Hamas was allowed to reinforce the presence in the occupied territories. So Mossad created Hamas. Meanwhile, Arafat's Fatah movement for national liberation, as well as the Palestinian left, were subjected to the most brutal form of repression and intimidation. The goal was to create an Islamist group that might help to rupture support for the mass nationalist movement of Fatah. 20 years later, Israel switched sides, hoping that it can encourage Fatah to see off Hamas. You see? So they create Hamas to get rid of Fatah, and then 20 years later, they switch sides. They're like, all right, I need you to get rid of Hamas now. Some shit that they created. Because it wants moderate Palestinians to take on extremist Palestinians that it helped to create. Yeah.
That's a crazy, but when we were kids, we didn't watch the news, but you just knew
that dude with the towel on his head and the black belt and that big ass hook nose. Yasser Arafat was always on the fucking news.
You just knew he was
in
evil.
The 80s.
You just knew he was the bad guy. It was either him or Russia, Gorbachev,
or Gaddafi.
I was going there, Gaddafi. So you were Gaddafi. Now, fast forward 20-something years, Gaddafi, before Gaddafi gets killed by Hillary Clinton, the guy worked with us on everything. He did everything to show, like, hey, man, I'm not this guy you said I was. When Reagan bombed, remember when Reagan tried to kill him and killed one of his kids? Like, there's so many reasons for Gaddafi not to like America. You know what I'm saying? And literally towards the end, he was trying to rectify. But once he decided to go on another currency and unite Africa, they had to kill his ass. So that tells you uniting Africa is more of a threat. More of a threat than when you was a terrorist, But you decided to unite Africa. Oh hell no, we can't let that happen. But you could bomb little kids, my nigga. But if you try to unite Africa, we want to kill you, son. You know what I'm saying? But what I'm saying is that we just knew, growing up, you just saw them on the news all the time, and you knew they were the bad guys. Here's the crazy part: that video you sent when they were talking about Biden. That was from the 80s. You had Dan Rather, Walter Cronkite, Sam Donaldson. How does that make the news make a blip in the news like for 25 seconds? But the hate makers made sure you saw Yasser Arafat. The hate makers made sure you saw that mad dog Gaddafi. That's what Ronald Reagan called him. The hate makers made sure you saw all this, all this other shit. You know what I'm saying? So literally, they've been manipulating the news for so long that we don't know what the news would look like without the manipulation. We wouldn't even know how to vet it, or it's just craziness. Because, like I said, we just knew they was a bad guy. Like, that's who you always saw. He had to be the bad guy.
Okay.
They do the same thing with black people. You got to be the only drug dealer, right?
Check it out. Let's talk about the founding of the Ku Klux Klan. The Ku Klux Klan. There was a group that included many former Confederate veterans, founded the first branch of the Ku Klux Klan as a social club in Pulaski, Tennessee in 1865. The first two words of the organization's name supposedly derived from the Greek word kaiklos, meaning circle. In the summer of 1867, local branches of the Klan met in a general organizing convention and established what they called an invisible empire of the South. Leading Confederate General Nathan Bedford Forrest was chosen as the first leader or Grand Wizard of the Klan. He presided over the hierarchy of Grand Dragons, Grand Titans, and Grand Cyclopses. The KKK was financed from England by the Jewish former Secretary of the State for the Confederacy, Benjamin P. Judah. He was a lawyer in the United States before the American Civil War. He served as the first Attorney General in the President Jefferson Davis's cabinet, and then as the Confederacy's Secretary of War before becoming Secretary of State from March 1862 until the Civil War, which then he fled the South at the end of the Civil War and eventually moved to England. So this guy ends up weaseling his way into the British government. He actually got membership in the House of the Lords.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's Jewish. Did we tell you he's Jewish? Yeah, he's Jewish. But I digress.
Look. So, okay, Benjamin P. Judah, his family they were Jews that were from Spain that moved to the Virgin Islands. They moved to the Virgin Islands because that was U.S. territory. So they moved to the Virgin Islands and they had a plantation there, a sugarcane plantation. Several episodes ago, I told you that any black person that works on a sugar plantation has a short life because they work them hard.
It was the worst, yes.
They have an average lifespan of 7 years. So then he moves to Louisiana from the Virgin Islands. And his wealthy family has a plantation of about, I think, 1,200 enslaved Africans on this sugar plantation in Louisiana. Now, historians would like to paint him in a favorable light, saying that he was a nice slave master. It's a sugar plantation. There's nothing about it that's nice, and it's slavery. Okay, so let's just cut the bullshit and stop trying to whitewash history. Okay.
Well, man, that's some shit.
So, there are almost no Confederate statues of the Jewish slave owners, and there's a reason for that. But there's only one known statue of Jewish Confederate leader, and his name was David Levy Yulee. He was an industrious, a plantation owner, and a Confederate senator from Florida, and it shows him sitting on a bench. The statue commemorates a railway that he built, not his Senate service. Who do you think built that railway? Black men did. Okay. It stands in the small northern Florida town of Fernandina Beach, population 12,500. So far, no one has suggested toppling it. So, Judah Benjamin did not have a statue created in his likeness. However, for various reasons, Jewish communities were not interested in raising monuments of their own. A popular opinion at the time was Jews should not create graven images of famous Jews, since it would defy the third of the 10 Commandments.
That's the old school.
Yes. Hold on. The early 20th century saw growing numbers in Klan membership and several business groups. By 1922, the KKK had 3,500 members and was bringing in at least $10,000 to the national headquarters each day.
Look, but if you
hold on. Also, fun fact, in Atlanta, Georgia, there were hundreds of Klan-owned real estate companies.
Ooh.
Yep, go on. That's redlining.
Hold it, you read my mind. That's where redlining got its start. Redlining remember with insurance companies and the way you can live, yada yada. But if you're looking for since you can't have the graven images of those Jews, but in the Caribbean, in Haiti, in the Virgin Islands, a lot of Jewish street names. A lot of those streets have Jewish names. A lot of them have synagogues down there. Now, if the Jewish presence wasn't there, why are those names? Why do you have Levitts and all these different street names of Jews in the Caribbean? Because they were slave owners and slave masters, and they owned the plantations. So, just because they don't have the graven image, just because they don't have the big statues like Robert Lee and all them like in the South, they don't need them, because look at them street names, and you'll see the Jewish connection right off the bat.
Now, let's flip the coin and go and look at some other shit on the other side. The Nation of Islam was founded in Detroit on July 4th, 1930 by a white man. His name was Wallace Dodd Ford, F-O-R-D, a.k.a. Wallace Fard Muhammad. Fard was a door-to-door salesman before gaining a following in the black community as a religious leader. In 1931, Fard met a migrant worker named Elijah Poole, who was from Georgia. For the next 3.5 years, he reportedly taught and trained him to be the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, night and day, in the profound secret wisdom of the reality of God. So,
I'm just going by what they told you.
You've been told a lot of shit, but you're about to learn some shit. So, the NOI considers Fard to be the Messiah of Judaism. The Mahdi of Islam, the prophesied Redeemer of Islam, and Allah in the flesh, and the second coming of Jesus Christ, Jehovah God, and the Son of Man. Fard mysteriously disappeared in 1934. He was last seen by Elijah Muhammad and was never heard of again. Check this shit out. In 1938, sociologist Erdman Bainan published in the American Journal of Sociology a first-hand account of several interviews he conducted with followers of Fard in Michigan. From those interviews, Bainan wrote that Fard lived and taught in Detroit from 1930 to 1934. He came to the homes of black families who recently migrated to Detroit from the rural South. He began by selling silks door to door, telling his listeners that the silks came from their ancestral homeland. At his suggestion, He came back to teach the residents along with guests. In the early stage of his ministry, Fard used the Bible as his textbook, since it was the only religious book with which the majority of his listeners were familiar. Now, with growing prestige over a constantly increasing group, Fard became bolder in his denunciation of white people and began to attack the teachings of the Bible in such a way as to shock his listeners and bring them to an emotional crisis. Of course, it's black people.
We talked about that before. That's the first thing that these charlatans teach, is that they attack what you know already.
Who else does this?
Oh, the Israelite brothers.
No.
And
who else does this? What white dudes come to your house? They want to come inside, sit down, and they start with the Bible.
Oh, Jehovah, what is it?
Mormons.
Oh, I didn't think about them. They don't. Hey, I've never had a Mormon come to my house, but I have a Jehovah Witness.
I see them all the time. Listen, man, they always show up, and the first thing they start talking about is the Bible. I got more, motherfucker. This is deep. This is fucking deep. Listen, Beinon's interviewees told him that reports of Fard's message spread throughout the black community. Attendance at the house meetings grew until the listeners were divided into groups and taught in shifts. Finally, the community contributed money and rented a hall to serve as a temple where meetings were conducted.
In Detroit.
Listen, the Quran was soon introduced as the most authoritative of all texts for the study of faith. Fard prepared texts that served as authoritative manuals on the faith and were memorized verbatim by his followers. As of 1920, Fard was still living in Los Angeles as a 26-year-old Wally D. Ford with his 25-year-old wife, Hazel E. Ford. In the 1920 United States Census, his race was reported as white. His occupation as a proprietor of a restaurant, and his birthplace as New Zealand.
Oh.
Listen to this shit. He provided no known place of birth for his parents, nor his date of immigration. A marriage certificate dated June the 5th, 1924, was issued to Wally D. Ford and Carmen Trevino, a Mexican woman, in Santa Ana, California. So he dumped the other chick and got married 4 years later. So look, Ford reported that he was a cook, age 26, born in Oregon, living in Los Angeles. This motherfucker just full of lies, ain't he?
He's making up shit as he goes.
Yes, Trevino, his wife, was a 22-year-old native of Mexico, also living in Los Angeles. Both provided their race as Spanish. Dude, listen. Freedom of Information Act documents revealed the life of Wallace Ford before he moved to Detroit and meeting Elijah Poole. Dodd left his family in 1916 and moved to Los Angeles using the name Wally Dodd Ford. A World War I draft registration card for Wally Dodd Ford from 1917 indicated he was living in Los Angeles, unmarried, as a restaurant owner, and reported that he was born in Shinka, Afghanistan, on February 26, 1893.
He just be picking.
Listen, dog. So, he further reported that he was a resident alien and a citizen of Afghanistan. He was described of medium height and build with brown eyes and black hair. And on the draft card, Ford is written in parentheses in the different hand. That's funny. So he was like, this is really my name, Ford. At the bottom of the card, he signed his name, Wally Dodd Ford. That's a trip. So on October 17th, 1957, the FBI located and interviewed Hazel Barton Ford, Wally Ford's common-law wife, with whom he had a son named Wallace Dodd Ford, born on September 1st, 1920. Barton Ford gave a description of Wally Ford and described him as a Caucasian New Zealander. I'm going to say this again. The FBI showed up at the residence of his mama, okay, Wally Ford's common-law wife, and he had a son named Wallace Ford, born September the 1st, 1920. So let me back that up. Okay, so this guy, that wasn't his mama. That was his wife.
His wife, common-law wife.
Common-law wife.
They never got married.
So yeah, he had a broad with his kid in 1920, and she described him as a white New Zealander. Okay, moving forward. This one's gonna just bust your head wide open right here.
He's lying to these women.
Listen, he's lying to everybody. Uncle Sam, the jail, everybody. All right, hold on to your seats because this one gets crazy. Fard was once a member of the Moorish Science Temple of America, citing as a primary source for the 1945 Arna Bon Temps. And Jack Conroy titled the book, They Seek a City. Authors have also cited E.U. Essien Odom for this proposition as well. In his 1962 book, look for that book, man, They Seek a City. It talks about the Moors. But check this out. So in his 1962 book, Black Nationalism, The Search for an Identity, Essien Odom wrote, Noble Drew Ali was shot and stabbed in his office at the Unity Club in Chicago on the night of March 15th, 1929. He was eventually released on bond, but a few weeks later he died under mysterious circumstances. Damn, you get stabbed, you call the cops, and they arrest you. Ain't that a bitch? So, some people claim that Noble Drew Ali died from his injuries inflicted by the police while he was in jail. Others, however, suggest that he was killed by Sheikh Claude Green's partisans. For some time, one W.D. Fard assumed leadership of the Moorish movement. Ain't this a bitch? According to Bon Temps and Conroy, Fard claimed that he was the reincarnation of Noble Drew Ali. This motherfucker just died, 9
days ago?
Yeah. So by 1930, a permanent split developed in the movement of the Moors. One faction, the Moors, remained faithful to Noble Drew Ali, and the other, which is now led by Elijah Muhammad, remains faithful to Prophet Fard Muhammad. However, Malcolm X and other leaders of the Nation of Islam and other leaders of the Nation of Islam emphatically denied any past connection whatsoever of Elijah Muhammad, Master Wallace Fard Muhammad, or their movement with Noble Drew Ali's Moorish American Science Temple. What are your thoughts? So much.
It's so much to unpack because, okay, so everything you ever heard about Elijah Muhammad was that Noble Drew Ali had 3 or 4 students, and Elijah Muhammad was one of them. That's what this is what all these motherfuckers that try to bring back the Moorish temple talk about, and basically they're saying that he was teaching nation building, and that Elijah Muhammad learned from him. Apparently, he learned from the reincarnated version of Noble Drew Ali, because sounds like Noble Drew Ali had nothing to do with him.
But how does this motherfucker reincarnate you? And this dude died in 1929.
So
you're a medium now? You a medium too? Okay.
But the nigga wasn't dead that long. You know what I'm saying? No, don't take a couple weeks for you. Oh my God. Okay. The reason this is so crazy is because whenever you start learning about this shit, this is not the story that they put out there. And here's another problem, is that this is the problem with all this TikTok nationalism, Instagram wokeness, and Facebook enlightenment.
That this organization was founded by a con man, a fucking con man.
A white con man at that, who was from New Zealand, Afghanistan, and wherever else. He basically, every woman he was with, he lied to about where he was from. Because he had 3 wives, it sounds like. And each one said New Zealand, one said Afghanistan. What did the other one say? Because this dude, he was just basically lying his way through the world. So here's the crazy part.
I'm trying to figure out why these black people are letting this white dude come to their house and teach them about the Bible, that everything they know is wrong. And then it's like, don't worry about that book. We've got this book over here. Man.
Well, it's real simple, because that's how it really happens. Okay, we've talked about in past podcasts. We talked about how the Hebrew Brothers or the Nation of Islam or these different movements, the reason they take hold so easily is because they sit here and show you that the Bible's a lie, or they sit here and show you that how they teach is a lie. Then all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is amazing. I've always felt a connection to this.
It's because people seek information. I'm not even going to say knowledge. People seek information, and people are thirsty for the truth. And whoever they think can deliver it to them, they'll follow that person.
But here's the problem, Roscoe. They give you two little bits of truth, and then everything after that is a lie. Or they give you enough truth to get you interested.
I saw this shit firsthand in the 90s with these brothers on the train trying to like peddle these little bullshit ass books called The Right Knowledge with Malachi York. It's the same thing over and over. It's these fucking criminals, it's these ex-cons that show up and they're like, yo, I got some information. I read some books in jail. Okay, that's great. That's nice. Have a nice day.
Look, here's the deal. When you were in jail, you had nothing else to do. So you started reading. I'm proud of you. That's awesome. But so many of these, this sounds so bad to say. Please forgive me for saying it. I know a couple ex-cons they're cons because they're back in jail, but they all became ministers. They were getting tax-free money. You know, they're literally ordained ministers. And I'm like,
oh,
you know the work.
Oh, no. Okay. Do you know there's a story about how this story broke in 2018, and this story is about how the United States government gave the Nation of Islam, I think, like $300,000 to teach Islam to convicts in jail. You know about that?
Shit. No. I ain't heard this one.
Yeah, so there's a story from the Daily Mail in the UK, and I think it was published on it's December the 19th. So, okay, this is what happens. They always, like that UFO story, the Tic Tac story, came out December 17th, 2017. And this story about the Nation of Islam, it just quietly went under the radar during the holiday season, December 19th. Everybody's focused on the holidays and shit, right? Nobody's going to be reading the newspaper. Nobody gives a shit. Everybody's in this fucking haze. And this story is a trip because it talks about the Nation of Islam. And I'm like, hold on. This motherfucker's like, the white man's the devil, the government on some bullshit, the government. But it's crazy because this story that I'm looking at it now, December 19th, 2018, the Daily Mail UK. Nation of Islam received $364,000 in contracts from the federal government to teach prison inmates. The Nation of Islam received hundreds of thousands of dollars from the federal government in the past decade to teach religion to prison inmates. And it has been revealed in documents that show between the fiscal years of 2008 and 2019, the Chicago-based organization received at least $364,500 in contracts and awards from the U.S. Bureau of Prisons and the Justice Department, according to the Washington Examiner. The Bureau of Prisons records indicate that the contracts were for the Nation of Islam religious services and Nation of Islam spiritual guide services and Nation of Islam study services and other programs. The Bureau of Prisons declined to offer any details about the contracts. It refused to say what materials were used by the Nation of Islam in its teachings. Okay, so this is really ironic considering the fact that they want to see the downfall of Babylon. They want to see the downfall of the American government. But they're perfectly fine taking money from the American government, right? I guess because you can't sustain yourself.
Hold it. See, there's a video on YouTube of Malcolm X when he tells you why he split from the Nation of Islam. It's not all what you think. And so he talks about Elijah Muhammad making a deal with the Ku Klux Klan in the South for safe passage for his people. So watch the video. And basically, I don't know who paid off who, but basically Elijah Muhammad was working with the Klan. So his people.
That's a famous story.
Yeah. So his people, when they were down there doing whatever they was doing, they wouldn't get harassed, hurt, or whatever. So this is what we mean by hate makers. You preach to me that the white man's a devil, but you're willing to do business with the devil. But now, after what you just enlightened me on, that Ford or Farhad the guy that taught
Wallace Ford.
Wally Ford. Wally Ford.
It's like a damn car dealership.
He sounds like a used car. I was about to say this. Hey, Wally. Boy, I got a Buick for you, my nigga. It's real simple. So this shows you that this might explain why he was so willing to deal with the Ku Klux Klan, because the guy that taught him was white. The person who introduced him to Islam was white. So that's some crazy shit. This changes everything. But that's what we mean by hate makers. Literally, it benefits the government and the people in charge for us to be at each other's throat.
I just like when I was exploring Islam as a preteen, I was just surprised as to like how different it was from regular Orthodox Islam. I'm like, why don't you just have regular temple and like regular prayers and all this other shit? You got all this stuff you preaching to people like a cult. Like if you go to a regular mosque, there's nothing like the Nation of Islam. It's nothing like that at all. But then like you go to the Nation of Islam, it's like a fucking cult. I'm like, oh, this is a psyop. This is one huge psyop. I see what's going on.
When you say psyop, you got to explain to people what you mean in this situation.
I just did. At the very beginning of the show, I gave a perfect example of propaganda and how the United States government paid $500 million to a British PR firm to make people hate people in the Middle East, so they will go to war and fight them.
Look, but I'm saying, so here's whenever you deal with this religious shit, there's always it's a pyramid scheme. You dig what I'm saying? So you got the grunts, then you got the guy above that, then you got the guy with a little bit more not.
You know, you sound like right now, Smedley Butler, talking about how he had different types of people in the military fighting wars for different type of people that run the banks and these fascist organizations. Listen, man, this episode is to show you these things that you may not have considered yourself, that have been in your face the entire time, and how they're so commonplace you think they're just organic movements that were created naturally, and they're not.
You hear us talk about these boule niggas, and we've explained what we mean and who we mean. But when you see Jesse Jackson, when you see Al Sharpton, when they march these niggas out because there's a conflict, or when you have our own vice president,
Black Lives Matter.
I forgot. I hate her so much, Kamala Harris. I forget her name because so literally when she was the attorney general, whatever, for California, there were men who their prison sentence was over, but she forced them to fight the forest fires as if to say your lives aren't important. Like literally, you want to say Black Lives Matter, but you had these guys. Their prison term was over. They should have been released. She did not release them. She forced them to fight the forest fires in California. How fucked up is that? I've served my time. I should be at home instead. Well, you know what? I don't want these good white people to risk their lives. Let's have these niggas risk their lives putting out fires. I might add that their time was up. Their term was up. I just refused to release them.
And if you want a firsthand account of what that was like, there's now a televised episodic drama on TV where you can watch this drama about these firefighters and that are prisoners and they're just putting their lives on the line, and they have a thankless job. Now they got a TV show about it.
But the whole issue is you got to listen to me. Their time was up. If you had 6 years, you serve your 6 years, they got you staying 6 more months to fight a fire. How fucked up is that? That's look, I don't like either side, but just the idea, whenever a story breaks about the Republican side, the so-called black Democrats always want to push that story, not realizing that, look, dude, both sides do the same shit. There's no difference. There's not a difference. Trump had classified papers. Well, our president now in office had classified papers. They keep fighting him. And what was his quote? You won't find anything of nature or whatever the term he used.
Valuable.
Forgive me. Yes, he said you won't find anything valuable or whatever out, but they were classified. And the only difference between him and Trump is that Trump said, hey, I could have made these declassified because as a president he could. This guy was a senator at the time, or a congressman, please forgive me which one, and he had classified information that he never gave back. So they're doing the same shit, but they criticize each other. All I'm trying to say is that while they're doing this, me and you are fighting each other over eggs. the price of eggs. Have you seen Facebook? There's all these memes about the price of eggs.
Hey,
because
you know how you deal with that?
buy some fucking chickens.
Buy some fucking chickens. Go out and get your some chickens and put them in the backyard, okay? And then you ain't worried about the price of eggs no more.
But that was the other thing I was pointing out a couple of podcasts ago, that please forgive me, one of these European nations, they gave 6 chickens to everybody. And literally Joe Rogan was talking about how the fact that it wasn't about the eggs, it was about the garbage. And so much chickens eat so much waste. They if you got say you cut up a bunch of peppers and throw the stuff you would throw away, chickens eat. So chickens were eating. They said they saved so many billions of tons of garbage going into the landfills because all these people had chickens and they were feeding Trust me, if we went back to basics, a lot of the problems we had would take care of themselves, and nobody wants to admit that shit. It's because we're fighting for convenience. We're not fighting for what's right. And convenience right now is a bigger factor in our lives than what really makes sense. Look, you talk about these electric cars. We tell you right now, electric cars pollute more than gas cars. How is that possible? Easy. That cobalt that you need to run that electric car, that battery, comes from the Congo and these places in Africa where they have fucking slavery. If you buy an electric car right now, it's nothing but slavery. You are endorsing slavery. So to build that battery right now, that shit right there is way more polluting than just having a regular car. Second, me and Roscoe have told y'all, listen to me, there's not enough natural resources for every person to have an electric car. That's one thing. Second, they want to control your movements. Electric cars, you can't go all over the place like other people can, like a regular car can. It limits your mobility. And last but not least, goofy ass that dude Tate said he said an electric car can be shut off. If you have an electric car right now, all they got to do is hit you with the right program and your shit is off. They're telling you that an electric car is more about control and it's about a narrative that's not true.
All right.
My brother told
this episode has been about manipulation. And different groups are being manipulated because they know which emotional triggers to hit.
They wind you up and point you in a direction.
That's it.
And you go for it.
And that's all I got. We out. Peace.
Holla back.